Hi, everybody. This is Sanjay Swamy here, and welcome again to the next episode of the Prime Ventures podcast, where we talk to industry veterans, experts, luminaries, people who have done it, people who are working on their exciting startups, and talk about life in the startup ecosystem. I have a really special guest today, a close friend, former colleague, and someone who I've really admired over the years, Donna Wilczek, here on the show today. Donna is SVP of products, innovation, and probably a lot more at Coupa Software. And Coupa, as you guys know, is one of the leading players in the enterprise, procurement, expense management areas. So Donna, welcome to the episode. It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here, and it's so great to connect with you and have this conversation.
Thanks, Donna. And I know that you're also no stranger to India. We worked together in the past at Kitera, and you visited India, and as you've mentioned to me several times over the years. Would be great if you could share a little bit about your background and, of course, the journey with Coupa and the association with India. And let's start there.
Sure. Maybe we start with the journey. How did I even get here? And I'd probably start even right out of college when I joined Andersen Consulting. And it was funny in those earliest days, being given an opportunity. Do I want to work on MacPack for the OS 390, this product that had been in existence for so long? Or do I want to try this new thing, PeopleSoft? And we were going to host it in a solutions center where the IT organizations at our customers would not have the technology. Andersen would have it. And it was such a strange concept. But of course, knowing me, my personality, of course, I want to go for the new thing. I want to really understand what's the latest thing. And ever since then, it's really been that journey of learning more and what is the next thing and how do I think about strategy and where the company should go. Through the years, then I went to a company called Kitera, where we met, of course. And at Kitera, I ran professional services implementing these solutions for these companies around the world. And that's the journey that really led me to India many times through the years. And what led me there is really this deep desire to connect with the engineering organization, to really share what customers were going through in our implementations and our run state working with these companies, and making sure the team could really understand the business problems and trying to figure out how to create solutions for those problems. But it also was one of the things I think that somehow frustrated me a lot because the technology was just simply not doing what I thought it needed to do in order to make these customers successful. And ultimately, at that point in time, I was really even considering leaving the industry and contemplating going into a different industry because on some level, I was just tired of apologizing to customers, apologizing to just people that had to use the technology. Luckily, I had been able to watch a company called Coupa and see that.
I thought you were going to say, luckily I got thick-skinned after some time and it didn't matter.
Luckily what?
I got thick-skinned and it didn't matter after some time.
No, that has never happened, Sanjay, ever. And it still hasn't happened. My skin is definitely not thick, even still. No, it was definitely a journey of saying, I personally need to find a company that's able to do the right thing, that is out there and doing something special, the technology supporting these customers and getting to a place where they could really get value. And again, luckily, I had been watching the startup company, Coupa. What was this company doing? How are they in our space and releasing so much new innovation? How are they executing so quickly? And I had an opportunity to meet with Rob Bernstein, the CEO of Coupa, and Ravi Thakur, who is really the head of everything, operations, services, you name it. The company wouldn't be where it was without these core people. And I had an opportunity to really sit down and talk about the company that was being created in those earliest days. And starting with this whole notion of making customers successful, period, hard stop, and creating an entire company wrapped around that culture. And ultimately, I made the leap and I moved over to Coupa.
Maybe you can describe a little bit about Coupa's business itself, who the customers are and what problems you solve for customers and,
Sure, of course. So Coupa is a business spend management company. What we do is we help our customers manage every dollar that they spend and make those dollars more effective. Look at reducing the risk of those dollars, improving the value of every single dollar, reducing the fraud potential of those dollars, and really getting to a place where a company can say, I know where my money is. I know how the organization is spending it. I have control over that spend, and I can direct it as needed based on the conditions my business is facing.
Got it. And what type of customers do you target at Coupa, or what scale companies are most efficient, benefit the most from it?
So organizations, our customers range anywhere from $50 million in annual revenue to upwards of hundreds of billions of dollars of annual revenue. The cool thing, Sanjay, is all of these customers are on the same platform, the same configurable multi-tenant SaaS model. So you never can really outgrow the solution. It's able to change and change with you because of all of the configurations. Today, I think something over 10 million permutations of configuration options available to these companies. So companies like Amazon, Barclays, Capital One, UPS, Walmart, right?
Fabulous. How big was the company when you joined, and how big has it grown to? And then specifically the product area itself, how big was that team and how has that grown? And can you share a little about that journey, right? Most startups, at one end of the spectrum in the very early days cannot even envision that kind of success, right? And let alone achieve it. And, always are planning probably 18, 24 months ahead. So it'd be great to, you've seen this now for 8+ years, I'm guessing. So it would be great for you to share the different phases of how it evolved.
Sure. Yeah, so it's been now going on 10 years at Coupa already. And the last 10 years, I would say, have been quite a ride. I joined when maybe there were 30 or so people at the company. We were in one small office in a bank building, and everyone's crammed together, but everyone there is really driving towards this singular goal of making our customers successful, creating an industry, doing something right, and getting our customers value. And it was interesting. It was this maniacal focus from everyone. All of the team members were so dedicated to that cause, to that creating that type of company that would actually deliver on making customers successful. And it's interesting because 10 years later, those same core values that we had are still these core values that drive every decision at the company. It's not just something we wrote on a wall or put on a piece of paper, but it truly is something that we're living every single day. And I think it goes back to those earliest days and building the culture, finding the right people that were completely committed to the goal at hand.
It's grown from being on the wall to now being on a Zoom backdrop, I can see.
Oh, I'm always, everyone that knows me will tell you that I really do, I bleed the values, because the values of this company are what make it great. It's this culture of every person, every colleague. And as we've grown, again, from those earliest days now to over 3,000 employees and probably somewhere near 6,000 or more consultants, SI partners and people that have been trained externally. So quite a different company from where we were to today. But those core values that you see behind me on my Zoom background is this tie that binds and has never wavered at this company. Prior to COVID, of course, I was traveling so much to all of our customer locations. I was traveling so much to our Coupa offices around the world. And you can really see that spirit in every office, in the meetings I would observe with my colleagues, sitting down with our customers. Everyone is committed to those core values and driving that way. And it's really special to see, 10 years later, still that drive for everyone around me.
It's fabulous. Maybe just drilling down a little bit on the culture and the values, right? I think most startups, I think they go through several phases, right? The first is where it's really the founders and the founding team. And then the next big wave happens where, you start scaling up. And we've had companies that we're fortunate to be investors in, where customers ask the sales guy, "Are you the founder of this company?" Right? And that tells me that, they have done a good job, at least at that stage, to have, transferred the values, right? But as the companies are trying to balance growth with retaining the culture, right? What are some tips you may have, for our audience, saying, how do you ensure that this happens, and how do you weed out people who are not fitting into the culture?
Yeah, weeding out is a very important aspect, isn't it? Is finding those right people and hiring for those people with the qualities that align to what you're trying to do. And some of it is really just, sometimes it's a person walks into a meeting, a room, that interview, and you can feel it. You can feel their energy, you can feel the hustle, you can feel the grit, and you can see from the examples that they're sharing with you of what they've accomplished and what their teams have accomplished, that unwavering focus on getting stuff done. And especially in a startup in those earliest days, everyone needs to have that, that true hustle to get stuff done and get it done quickly for these customers, right? And so, but weeding it out is hard. Oftentimes, at Coupa, I think what happens, especially now, is the culture is so strong. Sometimes people will weed themselves out because it becomes very uncomfortable for people that if you're surrounded by all of these people that are driving and really trying to get these customers successful, and you're not, you don't really fit in with the culture. And so we do see some of that. And we also see, making sure that we're, coaching people out at the right times. Don't let it fester, right?
Yeah.
Once you start identifying it, have conversations with the people, have authentic conversations with the people, see if they can get there. But if not, you really have to make the right decisions and do the right thing for the company ultimately. And sometimes it's a mutual decision. You both see the writing on the wall. And those early people are so critical to the success of the company.
So 10 years later, you said there were 30 people in the company, and just to at an approximate number, the company's had a great ride now, especially over the last 4 years since the IPO and stuff like that. But in a well-knit organization like this, right, the first 100 employees are critical there. 10 years later, how many of the 100 still are at the company? Is it a large percentage?
I haven't counted, but yes, a large percentage. And it's really cool, Sanjay, to see. I'll have meetings with some of these early people just, this morning. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's the same day. This morning, I was meeting with our business value engineering team and value solution consulting teams. And there were so many people that were from those earliest days, and they were still here. And the cool thing is seeing just how passionate they are and still committed to this notion that we're doing the right thing, we're getting our customers value, but a high percentage.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. So switching gears a little bit, as companies now, pretty large, several $100 million of revenue, publicly traded company. Can you talk a little bit about the build up to becoming publicly traded as a product person, right? I think because oftentimes when you're a venture funded, privately held company, you can sort of take a lot of shortcuts. You can, revisit things. You can restate numbers. All of these things, they don't really matter as much. But the preparation for an IPO, right? And then, of course, subsequently the responsibilities. What what is your advice to startups, right? Since you've lived through the journey, right? I mean, how early should they start thinking about it and worrying about it? And what's the right thing to do?
Start thinking about it immediately. Start living and working as if you were a public company. Don't have goals that it's okay to restate the numbers. Really try to get into that discipline of making sure that what you say you're going to do, you do. Have the right conversations with your customers. Don't get into revenue recognition issues where you're promising a bunch of things. Start early with the discipline, because the discipline is really critical, and it, again, builds that culture. If you try all of a sudden to say, oh, next year we're going to IPO, and we have to change the IPO, or excuse me, we have to change the culture of this organization to be thinking like a public company, it's really hard to do. It's very hard to pivot. And I would tell you that Coupa, for many years prior to the IPO, we operated as if we were a public company with the same discipline, the same mindset, the same mentality of closing out the quarter, of not getting into revenue recognition issues, not overcommitting to our customers, being authentic, being honest, and doing what we said we were going to do. So I would really counsel everyone as soon as possible, just act as if you were a public company. What are the standards that you would have to live to? Again, maybe not as deep, don't go as deep into that, but start practicing the right hygiene, the right practices, the right models. And in a product organization, practice it there as well, which is, again, don't overcommit. Don't get into situations where you're promising the customers the world. Walk away from deals if you need to. Have the courage to say no when what this customer is wanting from you, if it doesn't fit what your goals and your strategies are for your organization. And that's a really hard thing to do in those earliest days. At Coupa, we walked away from plenty of deals where there just was not alignment, that we were not aligned to that same goal. Sure, it's hard, right? The customer is ready to throw a lot of money at you. But ultimately, you have to decide, are you in it for a short term, or are you in it for that marathon long term?
Right. No, and it's interesting. We had a situation here, with the company where, customers knew that at the end of the quarter, the sales guys are under pressure to achieve quota. And so they would wait till the last week of the quarter and then start negotiating, right? And as a board and as a management team, we just said, let's remove this concept of quarterly quotas, right? And so the sales guys went back to the customer and said, that's okay. If you want to take 2 weeks to make the decision, take your time. But this is what our value proposition is, and this is what we're going to charge. And actually more deals started closing within the quarter once the customer realized that, you didn't feel the pressure of thing, right? And at the right terms. So I think a lot of these things, if you're thinking long term and doing things the right way, I think they pan out very well. But also, from the managing investors, right? And I'm a venture capitalist also. We track metrics, on a monthly basis and say, how come you missed, etc. There's a fine line between being ultra cautious and sort of sandbagging and saying, look, I'm only going to do X when you're going to do 3X, versus say you're going to do 3X and end up at 2.5X and sort of. So how should founders think about this? Right, when they're projecting to their board and investors and so on, what advice would you have for them?
Well, I think it is just as bad to sandbag, right, and blow out the numbers than really putting forward a realistic number. Because what people are looking for is that you are able to project a realistic number and you can get in that ballpark, because that's where you're really starting to see that the organization has maturity, that has the ability to predict and forecast properly and really understand kind of these sales cycles that are going through and figuring out which ones are going to close and what's not. It's a sign of a mature organization. So sure, in these early days, it's very hard to do, but you really have to get to a place where you can start trusting your sales organization. The sales organization feels confident and comfortable to accurately, state what's happening, as well as building, I think, a sales force that starts building relationships with their prospective customers, because ultimately that's what drives the signature. And that's what drives the confidence in whether you're going to close the deal or not. So if you don't build a sales force that has those relationships, has worked with the executives, with the right people at the organization, then you're going to continue to get all these wild fluctuations on what the number is, and no one ever knows what it is. So really start trying to seek out salespeople that are driving relationships with the right people at the organization. The conversation needs to be pivoted around the value, around really understanding what the goals are of this organization, and figuring out, can you create a mutual close plan with your prospect? Can you do that together? And if you can start doing that consistently, then ultimately that's how you get the trust in the numbers, and you're not either sandbagging or missing wildly, but you're getting to that place where you can trust the numbers coming out.
Super. So I've got a couple more topics kind of related. I hope they'll ask them in the right sequence. The second half of your title is about innovation, right?
Yes.
And of course, and you all have recently done some large acquisitions, so that's one way to do innovation, and we'll come to that in a second. But as the company scales up, right? I mean, you have these large marquee names, running core parts of their business on the platform. There's always this challenge of maintaining these large customers in their day-to-day business operations that you cannot mess up with, versus also needing to innovate, and you're sitting in Silicon Valley in the heart of the innovation hub on the planet, and there are always newer startups chipping away and trying to do some of the stuff that y'all are already doing or trying to do, but doing it faster and better with your platforms. How do you balance out, as the head of product and innovation, the two, right? And especially continue to be seen by your large customers as as the partner they can trust for the innovation as well.
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to these relationships with the customers. So first and foremost, the spirit at Coupa is really this: none of us is as smart as all of us. So start there. Start with this mindset that you will not create real innovation, pragmatic innovation, unless you understand the business problem inside and out. Evaluate that business problem from every single angle and try to get a lot of different viewpoints. Get close to these customers around what problem are they actually trying to solve for. It makes me cringe is when somebody says, well, this other platform does this thing. Honestly, I don't care at all. I don't care what the other platform does. What I care about is, first and foremost, the business problem. What problem are you trying to solve for? What goal are you trying to achieve? Then working with a lot of different voices, customers in different industries, different perspectives, different views on that same problem statement, and making sure that every release has room for innovation. You cannot just have a bunch of features that customers are specifically asking for. I need this feature. Likewise, you cannot just have innovation out there that is not meeting the day-to-day. So this art is really this balance, but you must reserve room for innovation. Otherwise, you're writing your death sentence for your company. Somebody else is going to out-innovate you, right?
Right.
So create an environment where, number one, it's okay to fail. It's okay to try ideas and prototype them with your customers and see. But the other advice I would give here is, don't innovate based on some technology because you're interested in using that technology. Innovate based on really understanding the problem statement, right, and figuring out the best technology for that problem statement. Don't all of a sudden over-rotate and say, oh, everything's got to be blockchain or everything's got to be AI or ML. Really understand the use case first, and then figure out what the best technology is.
Terrific. Yeah, so no, that's, I think, really important, right? I think as you keep looking at the use cases and the customer benefits, then the technology is a vehicle to achieve that rather than the primary thing. So let's switch gears a little now. You guys were in the news with this relatively significant acquisition of LlamaSoft, what 1.5 billion type of a thing. How probably a pretty large team as well. So would love to hear from you. How a company like Coupa thinks about M&A, which could be an outcome, positive outcome for several young startups as well that are out there today. And, also a process, right? How long ago did because people don't really understand, does this happen overnight? Do we build, is it a culmination of an existing relationship that's been working very well? How, and obviously there are the large startups and large acquisitions. I'm not talking about the smaller acqui-hires, which are a different situation. So how should startups be thinking about this? And how do you guys from the acquiring side think about companies to work with?
Yeah, so again, it goes back to those customers and the problem statements and really understanding what are the needs of the customer base and where do you want to go as a company? Where truly what are you trying to build? And when you understand the product, the customer needs, you can really start evaluating what are those white space opportunities? Where can we add value to these customers? Our M&A team at Coupa, I would say, is second to none because we're constantly partnered with the product organization and the M&A team. This is a collaborative exercise that we're working through around what are the customer needs? Should we build? Should we buy? And then really clearly articulating the intent of the acquisition. What is the intent? And making sure everyone is on board with that same intent. And one of the keys to our success with acquisitions, when we do acquisitions, is this notion that we are going to unify this company immediately. We're not going to allow it to sit as a standalone company with a standalone development team, engineering team, product management, sales, marketing. We're not going to do that. We are going to get after it on day one. Unify the team first, unify the people, and then bring them aboard and then work together as one team. During the M&A process, I think what's really critical to the success as you're thinking about these companies and a potential is first and foremost the fit of the people. It's the people that are going to make this acquisition successful. Are you culturally aligned? Do you have the right mindset? If not, you may want to walk away from it. It will never work. If you have to try to force it together, it's really hard to do. I think the world is littered with failed acquisitions because there just simply wasn't cultural fit. I don't think we need to name any names, but I'm sure we can both think of some right off the bat. Yeah. So really thinking through, is it a cultural fit? Is the combined company going to create a 1 + 1 = 3 situation? How would that happen? Really understanding and articulating the value of these combined organizations, understanding how the technologies will fit together and start building out those processes on day one, starting with unifying the team. And it's the same strategy we've applied to all of the acquisitions we've done at Coupa, regardless of the size, whether it was a tuck-in acquisition, whether it was a talent-based acquisition for domain and really small acquisition, or something like LlamaSoft, a power acquisition where we're going to retain the team, retain the technology, and unify ultimately with a focus on user experiences. But day one, start with that team, start with the unification of the team. And over the last few months, that's what we've been maniacally focused on at Coupa.
Wonderful. Great. So we're coming up on about 35 minutes. Would be great to, also, I think, on the personal front, you have a family, you have kids, how do you balance or do you feel like you are able to balance all of these things, right? And obviously, we have, women obviously have several more challenges in balancing a lot of these things. So
Yeah.
it'd be great for people to hear how you have managed to lead the way here.
So I would say it's work-life integrated. And for me, what has worked for me and would maybe not work for everyone is this notion of work-life integrated, where I work some crazy hours, right? So sometimes I'm on the phone in the middle of the night with customers around the world. Sometimes I'm up early to make sure we're supporting our European customers or working late for Australia. It shifts continually. So in my world, it's about work-life integrated and taking those times where I can block my calendar to be with my family, to be with my kids. The pandemic, of course, has actually changed the dynamic quite a bit because I was traveling well over 100,000 miles on an annual basis for many years. And the way we were able to achieve that is that my husband stayed home with the kids. We made a decision that would work best for us is that he would stay home with the children. And that's a hard decision to make as well, right? Non-traditional roles. But I feel that ultimately for me, what works is this integrated life. I'll share a funny story for you, which, I think, I don't know, a lot of people may think I'm crazy, but it's indicative of me. With my first child, it was maybe, I don't know, about a year into Coupa. And as you can imagine, startup days, everyone is working all the time, right? And I remember going into labor and I was working on my laptop in the hospital room while my husband was sleeping next to me, right? And the nurse walks in and says, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm working. I have all this Coupa work, And we just laughed. But it works for me. At no point in time was I uncomfortable with that. And I encourage everyone, find your personal balance and work with your management structure to be able to do that. But then also, as you're growing your startup, have empathy for your team members that are doing the same things, the people on your team and what they are going through, and try to determine how to help them balance those pieces of their life. And what works for one may not work for the other, but have empathy first and really try to think through, especially, I think everyone now is working digitally, working virtually. I think we have a lot of freedom to accommodate people if we first seek to understand and have empathy for those things. But what works for me may not work for you. I recommend everyone find their own balance.
Right. No, I was just recalling, about 3-4 years ago, there was this BBC journalist video interview and the baby crawled in and then the nanny came and pulled it away and it made the headlines. Yeah. But this year, I think everybody's gotten used to it. You almost assume you're going to see that in every video call.
Exactly.
And, it's not a surprise
Eventually,
anymore.
Some child or animal is going to come into the window. Knock on wood, I don't believe that's happened to me. My kids are...
I see one right now. No,
One of the things I think, again, we've set discipline in our house and the kids really respect the boundaries.
So do you see, you talked about 100,000 miles and obviously all of us are sort of itching to travel, at least for pleasure, if not for work.
Yes.
What do you think the post-COVID era is going to look like, and how are things going to change, and which part of that do you think is better and not so good? From a work environment.
Interesting question. I think everyone's trying to figure out what is this new normal, right? And on an almost monthly basis, the new normal tends to change. But, ultimately, I think that organizations will see a lot more people working on maybe different on-site schedules than what was before. Maybe no longer Monday through Friday, every day of the week being on site. Maybe more situations where teams will agree on what days they'll be on site and create these collaboration sessions more. I definitely feel that at least for the foreseeable future, I don't see a return to the Monday through Friday, everyone doing the same exact situation. Now, as the vaccines start rolling out, I certainly would expect a return to more travel. I can tell you I miss it. I miss being with our customers face to face. I miss these whiteboarding sessions. I mean, we do them all virtually now, and ultimately the output is the same. We're still innovating so quickly. We're still releasing new features so fast. But there's just something about a personal connection to sit down with someone and face-to-face bond over whatever it is that you created, especially in product, right? Celebrating these releases, celebrating this co-innovation. So something I miss.
Absolutely, yeah. How have you? So we had a small anecdote. Last week was the first time, as a VC fund, we have 17 employees as last team members, and last week was the first time we met since the first lockdown in the middle of March, and the team has grown from 12 to 17, and as I was driving into the thing, I just pulled up and I created a little survey in one of the. And sent it out to the team. I said, how tall and how big do you think your colleagues are, right? and for the existing ones, it was about the 5 new members, and for them it was the other 12 members, right? And we've had weekly Zoom calls every week, right? And as a team, plus everybody's had individual meetings. And I think probably 2/3 of us got it wrong, right? People we thought were like 5'8", it turns out it's a 6-footer, because this is all you get to see. Of course, sadly, nobody thought I was a 6-footer. So, but it was really interesting that we just realized that we have been working so closely together, and yet when you have not met, you just don't know much about. There's so many things you don't know, and I was also wondering, are we going to form opinions of people differently now, right? Because this aspect of someone is just not there, right? Whether they have an intimidating presence or not doesn't really come across in a Zoom call. We may probably make some better judgments as well. It was just one thought that I had. It'd be interesting to see. I think I also don't see us going back to a full 5-day regular work week. Of course, in our profession as VCs, it's probably easier to do. But sure. I can also say that as a seed stage VC, first institutional check, we always said, well, it's all about the team and we have to meet in person. Yeah. How can you make a decision? But we actually made more new investments last year than we ever have, right? So I think we've also found a way to spend more time with the founders, because otherwise they would say, well, I have to spend 2 hours in traffic to come and meet you. Correct. Can we just do it all in one meeting? Now they're happy to meet more often and so on. And I think there are some benefits that have come out of the last year as well. Obviously, the circumstances have been tragic and so on. But yeah, and I just was reading that Salesforce, after spending billions of dollars on that massive tower of theirs in the heart of San Francisco, suddenly said, that's the death of the 5-day work week, right? So yes. things are definitely going to be quite interesting to watch. So Donna,
it's a giant experiment that the entire world was forced into to see what would happen in a remote, obviously for our industry, what would happen to teams and organizations. At least for Coupa, and it sounds like for you as well, we saw productivity increase. We saw collaboration increase. We saw more output from the team members. So right. We'll see what happens.
And I think also, things that were, considered by customers as, I think it's done a lot to fast track the industry. In some cases, probably 5 years and billions of dollars of marketing could not achieve what happened last year. So certain industries, and like the ones you're operating in and several of the ones we've been lucky to invest in, have benefited for sure. Yeah. Great.
Donna, one thing I did want to say, one thing, just one last thing for anyone, any startups listening. I just want to commend you. You said when you went from 12 to 17 and you were coming in that meeting and you created this fast survey about how tall everyone is and what they weighed. I always want to remind everyone, have fun while you're doing this thing.
Yes.
Have fun with your colleagues, have fun with your team members, have fun with your customers. that's where, real innovation, real spirit, real connections come from.
Right.
It can't just be, constantly heads down work.
Yeah, I think a quote from one of my first CEOs that I worked with, a gentleman named Donna Gupta, who's the founder of Nexus Venture Partners now, in which is a cross-border VC fund. He had said once when I was working with him in the Valley, work should be more fun than fun. And I didn't really internalize it at the time. It seemed like a cool thing for a CEO to say, but it has really helped guide really, and it's so awesome for us also, 15 years later as, colleagues, we probably have worked together for maybe 6 to 12 months, but, the relationships are what matter over time. Donna, thank you so much for being on this. It's been wonderful. I'm sure, listeners and the entrepreneurs listening are going to love it. Congrats again on all the successes at Coupa, as well as on the way forward, as well as, personally, and wish you all the best.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. Fun chatting. Thank you.
Great. Take care.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.